Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Today we look at Jayne Magson, who was originally convicted of murder and jailed for a minimum of 17 years at Leicester Crown Court in November of 2016. The background on the first trial. 23-year-old Jayne Magson killed her partner James Knight on March 2016. She was never denied that she inflicted the fatal stab wound which caused his death. She had loved James despite his demeaning and violent behaviour towards her. Emma was convicted of his murder in November 2016 and sentenced to life imprisonment. The issues at her first trial were self-defence, lack of intent and loss of control. No psychiatric evidence was advanced on her behalf. Miss Magson did not give any evidence. It was Emma's mother who contacted Justice for Women on Emma's behalf. After Miss Magson's original appeal against conviction was refused by the Court of Appeal, Emma's family and her defence team began campaigning on her behalf and crucially re-examined the legal issues with a view to presenting some fresh evidence to the Court of Appeal with a view to challenging the original verdict. Emma met James Knight not long after the end of her relationship with a previous abusive partner. She had, in her childhood, witnessed domestic abuse, and her adolescent and adult relationships with men were characterised, in the main, by her differential and accommodating role. This background was not explored at her original trial. As Emma did not give evidence at her first trial, she did not talk about her experience of domestic abuse, both as a child witness and an adult victim, second trial and backstory. Miss Magson stabbed Mr. Knight in the chest with a steak knife at her home in Salvin Street in Leicester in the early hours on the 27th of March 2016. The couple had returned from a night out, during which Miss Magson had drunk large amounts of alcohol and Mr. Knight had drunk alcohol and taken cocaine. The judge said Mr. Knight had been behaving stupidly and somewhat aggressively as a result of the cocaine, and at one point telling a man no one was going to get his girl. Mr. Knight was asked to leave the bar, police were called and they spoke to him. The couple had got a taxi home but started arguing, and the driver asked them to get out after Miss Magson was seen kicking out at Mr. Knight. CCTV in Poole Road then captured Mr. Knight as he pushed Miss Magson against a car, causing her to fall to the ground at about 12:45 am. Miss Magson is thought to have stabbed Mr. Knight at her home between 1:10 and 1:30 in the morning. The steak knife penetrated his body to a depth of 11.5 centimeters as it passed through one of his lungs and his pulmonary artery. In her evidence, Miss Magson claimed she had grabbed the steak knife in self-defense because Mr. Knight had a hand around her neck and she could not breathe. While the jury did not accept this, the judge said there was no evidence that Miss Magson intended to kill Mr. Knight. Although I am sure that you were motivated by anger towards James Knight when you stabbed him, I accept that there is no sufficient evidence that you intended to kill him, as opposed to causing him to suffer serious bodily harm, the judge said. Miss Magson and Mr. Knight were in a relationship for about 6 months, having met around the end of September and the start of October of 2015. The trial heard how the couple's relationship moved very quickly. Mr. Knight moved in with Miss Magson the day after they slept together. She soon became pregnant but then suffered a miscarriage. The judge described their relationship as being volatile and characterised by jealousy on both sides, verbal arguments and sometimes a degree of physical violence. He said Miss Magson was responsible for some of his violence, including striking Mr. Knight with a hoover pipe and stabbing him in the chest with an item of cutlery. The court was told of text messages from Mr. Knight to Miss Magson in which he repeatedly called her a slag. He also called her fat while she was pregnant with his child and told her to lose weight. The retrial heard how Mr. Knight admitted to one of his friends that he had gone to strike Miss Magson during the course of an argument. However, the judge said he was sure that he showed no further physical violence towards Miss Magson. Jurors were also shown photos of red marks on Emma's neck, which her defence team claimed were caused when Mr. Knight strangled her. However, the judge said these red marks could equally been of cause when James Knight had pushed Miss Magson into the car on Poole Road at an earlier point in the night. The judge criticised Miss Magson for not immediately calling for an ambulance. She lied to his brother Kevin Knight, who lived in the same street, and suggested he had been beaten up by some bouncers in town. Kevin Knight believed her and helped Miss Magson carry his brother back home, not realising he had been fatally wounded. In her evidence, Miss Magson said, "I was just scared to say it was me and I had caused the problem. I was terrified." Obviously scared to admit to his brother that the reason he was like that was because of me. "I didn't dare say that." After Kevin Knight left, Miss Magson called 999 to ask for help, but did not say she was responsible for him being hurt. Instead, she said it looked as if he had been in a fight with someone. The judge said her actions were motivated by a desire to expel herself from the responsibility of his murder. However, he said there was no medical evidence as to the likelihood of his life being saved had he received prompt medical attention. Miss Magson originally went on trial at Leicester Crown Court in 2016, was found guilty and given a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. However, the conviction was quashed by the Court of Appeal and a retrial was ordered after it heard that evidence about her mental health was not put before the trial jury. Miss Magson's retrial took place at Birmingham Crown Court. Jurors were unable to reach a unanimous verdict following the retrial, so Emma was convicted by a majority verdict of 10-2. When setting Miss Magson's sentence, the judge explained he was not able to give a minimum term that exceeded the original one. He told Miss Magson, "You may never be released, and that will only occur if and when the parole board is satisfied that it is no longer necessary for the protection of the public that you should be confined. Even if you are released, you will remain on license and are subject to be recalled for the remainder of your life." In a statement, Mr. Knight's family said they were disappointed that the Justice for Women felt there was enough evidence to support a retrial, bringing us back into court for more than 4 years on. They added, their view to make Miss Magson seem completely like the victim was wrong and unfair to James Knight. They described Mr. Knight as a devoted father of 2 beautiful girls, a loving son, brother and uncle, as well as a friend to many. "We remember James as a very happy, bouncy young man who made everyone's day brighter with a smile that was infectious. Something no one will ever be able to forget and something we will always treasure," the statement said. Justice for Women said they were disappointed by the majority verdict, adding the case highlighted a public lack of understanding of the dynamics of abusive relationships and the way in which women in abusive relationships tend to be perceived in the criminal justice system. So what are your thoughts about Emma Jayne Magson's situation with partner James Knight and how 2 personalities that clashed came to a brutal final ending? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.